Hi everyone, it's a brand new week. We're all kind of getting on with things, and I thought with a lot of the craziness that kind of has been 2020 so far, just with everything being some sort of pandemic or horrible thing going on at the moment, I thought we'd look at some things that are a little more positive that has more or less been overlooked with everything going on at the moment. And this will primarily be things that have happened in science so far this year that just hasn't really made much in the way of media coverage, which I think in any other year would have just blown up. So let's get that started. Number one, using NASA's Hubble Space Telescope, scientists have found what's known and captured footage of what's known as a cosmic ring of fire. Now, the interesting thing about this ring is that due to the distance between itself and us, been able to calculate that we're currently viewing this cosmic ring of fire from 11 billion years ago. That's how far it is away from us due to the speed it takes for that light to get to us. So we're witnessing potentially a new little universe or galaxy similar to the Milky Way from 11 billion years ago, which is kind of roughly when things were starting to form and come together. And they believe that there are loads of stars currently being created in that galaxy that from how we perceive it, that we were currently doing 11 to 70 billion years ago. So we're witnessing kind of the after effects from the Big Bang going through that galaxy, whereas here obviously we're that much point ahead, we can't see that far behind. But because it is so far away, we can view this universe physically forming, which is, to me, it's kind of crazy. Like, you're almost going back long enough and looking into the past because of the amount of time that light refracts back. It's just, to me, it's crazy. Number two, according to studies this year, they have published that apparently our days are getting longer, but our years are shrinking. So basically our seasons are starting to come around more rapid and our days are stretching out more. Now that might not make much sense and is quite counterintuitive, and it's not something that's drastically changing, but according to researchers and archaeologists and basically people who study fossils of any sort, they have found that apparently 70 million years ago, an average day was only 23 hours, as opposed to now where I believe our current day is 23 hours and 58 minutes. And an average year was about 372 days as opposed to our 256. Having a longer day now, it theoretically means that our planet is rotating on its axis slower than it did 70 million years ago. The exact effects of what occurs with that are unknown, but it shows that our planet as a whole, it's spinning on itself, is slowing down. Now this could potentially mean issues probably like 70 million years in the future, so it won't really bother us, but it does potentially mean that the risk of staying on Earth for just permanently for the rest of days might start to become an issue in like hundreds of generations to come. I mean, they probably won't even look human still by that point, but for the most part, 70 million years time, the Earth might slow to a point where it's not rotating on its axis, and that will cause so many issues on the planet, just unforeseen. And then because our years are shrinking, obviously a full year is our orbit going round the sun from one point right round to back to the same point, a full rotation around the sun. And if that is getting shorter, it means that we're spinning round the sun quicker. And if we're getting round the sun quicker, it means we're theoretically closer into the sun. So if we've got the same speed, It means to be able to speed up that rotation, you need to be further in at that speed, same speed, to get around quicker. Or it means that we are slowly speeding up on our rotation. And that could either be like a slingshot effect where we're speeding up due to the gravitational pull, and eventually that will, like a slingshot, just ping us out further into space, which causes the issue of our temperatures will rapidly decline. Or it means we're slowly being sucked into the sun, which means at some point the Earth will be eviscerated. I don't know which way that'll go, but it's definitely something interesting to think about. It's not something that's on the immediate to-do list. For number 3, this one's a bit more exciting, especially in the medical world, is that a bunch of scientists, I'm looking at the screen here because this is going to take me a while to explain. A bunch of scientists have taken a blind patient who has become blind due to a degenerative gene within their DNA sequence, and have used microscopic tools, and by using a process known as CRISPR, have managed to edit the person's genes to remove that deformity. Now, that was a lot to take in, especially for someone who's not as smart as myself. So basically CRISPR, so it is short for clustered, regularly interspaced short palindromic repeats. So it's basically, from what I gather, it's how your genetic sequence comes to be and stays together. So by having the ability to edit that, you're actually editing the genes itself. So if you have a history of any sort of degenerate, that's the word, degenerate diseases, this could potentially be a process in the future that can solve those issues, re-edit and mitigate those genetic pathways, I believe. I might have butchered that, I'm not sure. But one thing that's been mentioned that makes it really exciting is if this becomes a constant and something we're able to do successfully and continuously, it's something that can potentially re-edit and remove both HIV and thus AIDS, which means there is something that's just so life-changing for the negative can be edited out of your system, theoretically. And that is exciting. Despite everything else going on in 2020, that's an exciting piece of news. So number 4, and another one to get really excited about if you're in the medical profession, is that scientists have found a way, I believe it's called channel, basically not like Chanel, but SHANEL, so channel. I think it's channel. I'll call it channel rather than Chanel. It's, it makes it allows us to define between two. So basically, channel is a process where you can make organs look transparent. So if you're wanting to say peer into someone's liver, a patient's liver, then basically channel is an approach that you can view that liver without having to remove it and cut it up, and basically you can watch the whole process of how the liver works just by using lasers to scan that organ in that patient's body after this Chanel process has occurred. Now, as exciting as that is, that's not the important part to this. The important part is what that could then be used for, because at the moment, obviously with the advancements in living tissue and 3D printing, is the idea in the future is that we will be 3D printing new organs for people who require them. So rather than relying on kind donators who are living or have unfortunately passed away are passing on their organs, basically for recycling a human body, basically, is that idea is that we can take someone's organ that's currently inside them and might be failing them in some way, and be able to scan that as if we were scanning a bolt or a cog or any part of a machine, and 3D print an exact working replica of that original, and be able to use that organ to replace the faulty organ within the body. Now that is another thing to be crazily excited about. And obviously this is probably a process that's still being developed. It comes obviously from two or three totally different industries that are still evolving quite rapidly at the moment, are still quite young in their kind of lifespan. But it shows the potential in the future that if there's something faulty, you can just get a replacement. If there's an organ, and because it's an organ you use at the moment and it's like for like, theoretically the body should be able to adapt to it better. It should be, I say should because it's never a tried and done deal, but it should be able to adapt to that new organ quicker because it's so similar to what your body's currently used to. And then the advantage with being able to make the original organ transparent is you can watch everything going on inside without having to remove it and slice and dice, which gives you a more accurate view of what's going on. And then when it gets 3D printed, you can still be using that original organ while that's being used. It's not being taken out. You're on some sort of support machine while someone goes away, slices it up, tries to make sense of the jigsaw puzzle, 3D prints it, and hopefully brings it back. You can still keep that original organ. Even though it's failing, the chances are it might still be working to an extent. It's on the decline. So rather than going all or nothing, you can still keep the original until the new one comes along, which will just causes so many less issues, because rather than having two surgeries, one to take the organ out, take it away, sew you back up, then when the new one undergo a second surgery, which would just be exponentially increases your rate of not surviving, is it can just be done in one surgery. And I like to think that doing something once is going to be more effective than doing it 2 or 3 times, because if someone does it once while they're awake and just active and wanting to get on with it, you're more likely to see a result than someone who's just having to come back to it and pick it up again and again and again. But that's just a side thing. The main focus is 3D printing organs. And the last one, now this one will be very controversial because obviously it's made with stem cells. But before I get into it, basically this new startup called Blue Nalu, so it's BLUENALU, have grown their first artificial yellowtail sushi, or basically yellowtail meat from stem cells. Now, for those of you who don't know, yellowtail is a type of fish, and obviously it's a meat product. Up until now, it's conventionally for these stem cell things have been beef, so it's always been, you know, kind of typical cow meat, whereas this is the first time it's been done with fish. Now, the difference between cows and fish is the fish population is in rapid decline. This is just due to how efficient we've come to capturing these fish at sea, and basically with how we pollute the oceans. Basically, we're just slowly making the earth not a nice place for fish to be. And things like tuna, we've killed off or at least eaten about 90% of the population of tuna. So it's down to its last 10%, and we're still going, we're consuming more than ever. And there will eventually get to a point where in all species, if you get below a certain percentage of your species left, there's no way the species can survive, and that's due to not enough you become genetically sparse. So that's where things like inbreeding come in, and it just doesn't become enough left to just continue. You'll eventually just age out of existence, and that's what we're currently doing with fish. So the idea of this is to me is much more exciting than a stem cell beef burger, and it's because we could potentially move a lot of heavy fish eating countries, especially your Asian countries such as Japan, that eat and consume a lot of this fish, and it's almost become part of the culture. If you can move them onto this stem cell grown meat, it means one, we're killing off less fish, so it means the fishing industry will slowly not decline, but we won't need to capture as much of them. So it allows these groups of fish to kind of repopulate and have time to, basically get their numbers back up again. And two, it's cruelty free, so it means we're not having to kill a life just to feed a life, and it kind of becomes rather than one sacrifice to keep one thing alive, you've got zero sacrifices to keep two things alive, because the fish doesn't need to die and you get fed. So it's kind of a 0 for 2 rather than a 1 for 1, if that kind of weird maths makes sense. And that's really exciting, because that means we could potentially also reduce the prices of types of meat that were seen as very expensive before, which means if we reduce the overall price of food products, it means it becomes more accessible to people, especially in developing countries where money doesn't quite go as far as developed countries. And that becomes more exciting, because that gives us another stepping stone towards kind of solving that food shortage issue globally that's happening at the moment. Because what people don't understand is nothing that we eat or consume at the moment is kind of really made that organically. Everything's processed. All sorts of farming is kind of maximized to a way that's not really sustainable. So the idea of being able to do this allows us to not get rid of it completely if we don't want to, but reduce the amount of consuming of actual fish, which allows them to repopulate, which means we can go back to a way when there was a lot less humans on the planet and we just took what we needed and it wasn't impactful enough to affect whole species at a time. And to me, that's kind of exciting. It's a bit of a strange one, but it is another avenue that we always overlook that is really exciting. And that's basically the video, because we're still in lockdown, there's still not that much to do. But basically that was 5 things that have happened in science so far in 2020 that no one talks about. Now, if you kind of like this video, I'll put a link to the article I got all that information from in the weird section below. And if it's something you kind of want to see again, I quite like making these because it gives me an excuse to read up on something, or at least go away and have a look into something I would not learn otherwise. So I might start looking to making a couple more of these moving forward. But that's it for today. I hope you enjoyed. I guess I don't know how to finish. My hands are in a weird position. Anyway, bye.